Shadow and Bone takes place in a fantasy world like no other, with the Shadowfold, the Grisha, and their powerful small science. To build this world and the country of Ravka, author Leigh Bardugo broke away from medieval European-inspired fantasy and turned instead to 19th century Russia for inspiration. Bardugo's combination of imperial Russian influences and high fantasy makes the Grishaverse part of a genre she dubbed Tsarpunk. With Shadow and Bone now streaming on Netflix, let's take a closer look at some of the real-world inspirations for the Grishaverse. As the story goes, when Bardugo was first building the world of Shadow and Bone, she found an Imperial Russian atlas in a used bookstore. As she flipped through the pages of military campaigns and trade logs, she realised that this was the perfect kind of world for the story she was telling. Shadow and Bone's narrative deals with class divisions and military conflict in a war-torn country. Using Tsarist Russia as a starting point helped Bardugo focus in on these fundamental issues. Consider the military history of both countries. Ravka is in a constant state of war with Shuhan and Fjerda, and the ill-equipped First Army is stretched incredibly thin. Similarly, Russia was involved in many military conflicts throughout the 19th century, including the Napoleonic Wars and the Crimean War. Both also have highly structured social hierarchies, with a massive gap between the nobility and the peasants where the societies saw lasting impact from devastating wars. One of the most recognisable elements of Russian history in Shadow and Bone is Ravka's leadership. Ravka is ruled by the Lantsov dynasty. Sound familiar? The name Lantsov might remind you of the Romanovs, the dynasty of Tsars and Tsarinas who ruled Russia from 1613 to 1917. Although the head of Ravka formally holds the title of king, he is also occasionally referred to as Tsar. Here's a fun fact. The Lantsov crescent is the Ravkan double eagle. You know who else uses the image of the double eagle? That's right, Russia. The double eagle was a part of the Russian Empire's coat of arms and became associated with the Romanovs. Russia's current coat of arms also features the double eagle. Aside from the Lantsov dynasty, Shadow and Bone features other characters whose roles seem pulled from the pages of history. Take the Apparat, for example. A religious advisor in close proximity to the throne? Getting some big Rasputin vibes here. Another set of characters with historical significance are the Oprichniki, the Darkling's elite guards. The Oprichniki was the same name for the bodyguards and state police of Ivan IV, who declared himself the first Tsar of Russia in the 16th century. You may know him better by the name Ivan the Terrible. Now, we're not saying the Darkling is Ravka's version of Ivan the Terrible just because their guards share the same name, but he did create the Shadowfold and has a habit of cutting people in half. So, not great. Bardugo also drew on the Russian language to create certain Ravkan terms. Words like merzost, meaning abomination, are directly lifted from Russian. Others are changed from their Russian counterparts. In Ravkan, Otskatsaya is the name for someone who isn't Grisha and means the abandoned. However, in Russian, otkazat is a verb meaning to refuse. Another massive difference between Russian and Ravkan is the meaning of Grisha. In Russian, Grisha is a nickname for Gregory, a name Bardugo chose to pull from due to its biblical significance and links to fallen angel tales. So, if you think about it, Shadow and Bone is really a part of the Gregverse. When it came to constructing the Ravkan language and script that would be seen in the show, language creator David Peterson worked to make an alphabet that would resemble a fantasy version of Cyrillic, the script used in Russian and other Slavic languages. However, apart from the terminology used in Bardugo's books, the rest of the Ravkan language that Peterson created was not specifically based on Russian or any other natural languages. The Russian influence extended to other elements of the show's production as well. Composer Joseph Trapanese was inspired by Slavic music when scoring Shadow and Bone. He and Bardugo even played each other's Sergei Prokofiev pieces as references. Trapanese's influences were not solely limited to Slavic sounds. Other examples of global influences include the Javanese gamelan, which Trapanese incorporated into the Grisha theme. While most of Shadow and Bone's action takes place in Ravka, the Grishaverse is vast. Other historical periods and regions of our own world provide inspiration for different countries in the Grishaverse, including Scandinavia for Fjerda and the 18th century Dutch Republic for Kerch. The city of Ketterdam, home to everyone's favourite crows, is a mix of Amsterdam, Las Vegas, London, Antwerp, and even Old New York. Shadow and Bone is by no means a history lesson. Ravka is not an alternate Russia, nor is Ketterdam an alternate Amsterdam. Bardugo used these time periods and countries as points of departure to build something new. By twisting the familiar into the fantastic, the books and shows straddle the border between what's real and unreal. We feel grounded, yet transported somewhere else at the same time. While Ravka is definitely influenced by Russia, it's still very much its own place, one that we'll get to keep exploring in Shadow and Bone. What are some of your favourite parts of the Grishaverse? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to follow Netflix Geeked for everything geek at Netflix.